One day, a little more than 200 years ago, a boy was walking along a crowded street in London. This boy was not thinking about the bells of London. He had been reading a story in a book and he was thinking of the people in the story, especially of a man called Leander who swam across the straits named the Hellespont. The story of Hero and Leander is told in a poem. These two people were in love with one another. But Hero, who was very beautiful, was a priestess of Aphrodite and she was not supposed to fall in love or marry. Leander lived at Abydos, which is on one side of the straits of the Hellespont. Hero lived in a high tower at Sestos, which is on the other side of the straits. The shores are rocky and dangerous, beautiful to look at, but hazardous for sailors and ships. Tides and winds make it difficult to sail through the straits and very difficult at times to swim across from shore to shore. Leander used to swim from Abydos to Sestos after nightfall to see Hero, who had ultimately become his wife. And Hero, on her high tower, held a lighted lamp that shone like a star to guide Leander so that he would not be dashed on the rocks. The name of the boy who had been reading the story was Samuel Taylor Coleridge. He was a country boy, the son of a clergyman, and he was at a boarding school in London. The school was for boys whose parents had not much money or who had no parents living. On a school holiday, after breakfast, at which there was not a great deal to eat, the boys who were boarders were sent out into London and were not expected to come back until nightfall. Sometimes they had nothing to eat all day long until supper time. Coleridge was one of the boys who had to spend his holidays in this fashion. On one holiday, Coleridge, as he walked along the crowded streets, began to imagine how it would feel if he were swimming the Hellespont with Leander. You know how often we think when we are reading an interesting book that we are living with the people in the story. Being greatly absorbed in his thoughts, Coleridge began to move his arms as if he were swimming. If he had been in a field by himself or on an empty street, no one would have minded. But Coleridge was on a crowded street, and by one of his arms struck a man who was passing, and his hand caught in the man's pocket. The man thought that Coleridge, who was only a boy, was trying to steal from him. However, he asked Coleridge a good many questions and discovered that the boy had been reading in a book the story of Hero and Leander, and had been imagining that he was swimming across the Hellespont. When the man found that Coleridge loved reading but could not get the books he wanted easily, he took the boy to a library which was not a free library but one where people had to pay a fee, and the man arranged for Coleridge to be allowed to read there. Many stories are told of the different ways in which boys and girls have found famous books which they have read with enjoyment and never forgotten. Another boy called Samuel Johnson had been looking for apples that he knew were hidden somewhere. He climbed upon a step ladder to look behind the rows of books in his father's bookshop, and while he was looking for the apples, he found Plutarch's Lives. Very likely, the boy Samuel Johnson began reading the book and forgot about apples. Another boy once was told to watch a fire which was burning rubbish in the field so that it would not spread and burn the fences. He watched the fire for a while, but he had a book in his pocket, and presently he forgot to watch, and so the fence was burned. Likely he was punished at the time, but years after his friends used to tell the story, for the boy had become an eminent man. How many of us have climbed into trees to read books in a leafy solitude? Lucia May Alcott was one of the girls, later known for her charming stories, who had a special tree into which she used to climb so that no one should interrupt her while she was reading. We do not all like the same books, and this is likely the best way. For some books which may seem dull to us, other people find interesting. What is important is for each of us to discover the books we enjoy most. So, if we do not happen to like Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift, there is no great harm done. Although Swift was a notable writer, and if some of you do not care for Robert Louis Stevenson's Child's Garden of Verses, now the chances are that by the time you are over 60, you will think it is a charming book, and you may even repeat the verses aloud to your grandchildren. Today, we learn about Charles Dickens. It is an odd reflection how silent a book may seem when it is waiting on a shelf to be read. But once its covers are opened and our eyes follow the lines of print for page after page, voices speak, people that we had not known before become familiar to us, or old friends give us greetings, thoughts, knowledge, events pass from the silent pages into our minds. Some books possess the property of rich and glowing life in a high degree. No books surely have it more abundant than the novels of Charles Dickens. Here are stories of friends for us, playmates, companions. If anyone has a fit of loneliness, or should anyone be looking for change and variety, let him open one of Dickens's novels. Which one will he choose first? a boy or girl is well advised who takes, shall we say, David Copperfield or Pickwick Papers. One or the other will make an excellent beginning. Having read one or both, it is unlikely that the reader will refrain from adding 5, 6, 7, 8, or even 12 more novels by Charles Dickens to the list of books he is happy to remember having read. What are the names of Dickens' other better known novels? Nicholas Nickleby, Oliver Twist, The Old Curiosity Shop, Branby Rudge, Martin Chuzzlewit, Dombey and Son, Bleak House, Little Dorrit, A Tale of Two Cities, Great Expectations, Our Mutual Friend. But still, we must add the Christmas books, for no one, old or young, should lose the benefit of having read A Christmas Carol. And there is also the unfinished novel Edwin Drood, probably more talked of still than any other story of mystery, new or old. It is nearly more than 100 years Dickens left the story incomplete, but how gladly many people still would discover the secret ending that the great novelist had planned in his mind. Once read, Dickens' novels cling to the memory. The characters he made inhabit this world of ours as substantially, it seems, as people do who have been born not from imagination merely. As lately as the spring of 1928, the London Hotel, the Adelphi changed owners. In a brief history of the place, a list of persons was given who had visited it, ending with the remark that Mr. Pickwick had had his first dinner there after being released from prison. The other people mentioned were what we describe as historical characters. Mr. Pickwick, although thousands of people know him so well that if they met him on the street, they could not possibly fail to recognize him, is the miraculous product of Dickens' imagination. If you have not read Pickwick Papers, in a few hours you too may know Pickwick, and he will be for you also a life friend. When we read these stories for the first time, we must be prepared to become acquainted with Dickens' characters much in the same way as we meet strangers in everyday life. His people are odd, exuberant, amusing, extravagant. They are too strange to be true, we may say to ourselves. But as we read on, we come to know them so well that the oddness and queerness seem to wear off. We look into their hearts and forget to be surprised by their extraordinary looks and characteristics. Sam Weller is odd, but he is the most delightful, amusing young man on his own, once boots at the White Hart Inn. Like Mr. Pickwick, Sam lives in Pickwick Papers. No one could imagine a better Sam Weller than Dickens' creation for the simple reason that to make a better Sam Weller is impossible. It is a glorious adventure to sit out of doors in summer or in a warm, quiet room in winter and read one of Dickens' novels. What happenings, what delightful, absorbing people, what a stir of life. What laughter, gaiety, bravery, what wonderful meetings with high and low fortune. The world of Dickens' novels is a world of coaching days, of old English roads and inns, of feasts and conviviality, a sporting world, often hard and cruel, in which existed bad old customs against which Dickens fought with all his might. A boisterous world of strange adventures, great friendships, and measureless laughter. These books are crowded with people diverting and friendly, grotesque and menacing, or grotesque outside but with golden hearts hidden behind the queer exteriors, loving people, heartless people, beautiful people, brave, true friends, friends of everybody. We have already spoken of Mr. Pickwick and Sam Weller, his man or valet. Mr. Pickwick's benevolence, his goodness of heart, innocence, and simplicity make us love him more and more as the story unfolds. Sam's wit and audacity, his extraordinary good humor and high spirits, his devotion to Mr. Pickwick, his independence and self reliance make Sam so real that he seems never far away. He is always only round the corner of our minds and will appear jauntily as soon as we think of him. In the one book, Pickwick Papers, there are a dozen other characters only less wonderful than these two. Would anyone prove at once how diverting and delightful such a book can be? Let him read A Christmas at Dingley Dell in chapter 28, or The Adventure at the Great White Horse in chapter 22, or The Trial of Bardell against Pickwick, chapter 34, or for natural feeling simply expressed, the lines in which Tony Weller, Sam's father, tells of Mrs. Weller's death in chapter 52, or the downfall of Mr. Stiggins in the same chapter, or in the last chapter of all, Sam's devotion to Mr. Pickwick. Striking characters of a like description are to be found in all Dickens's novels. David Copperfield is probably the richest of all in this respect, although one can easily imagine a dispute amongst the warm admirers of Dickens's as to which novel is preeminent in the possession of immortal characters. Those who love David Copperfield best can scarcely discuss the book with detachment. It belongs, as it were, to such a reader's own special family life. The novel holds a wonderful company of people. David himself, Peggotty, her brother and nephew, little Emily, Mrs. Gummidge, Miss Betsy, Trotwood, Stitforth, Traddles, the magnificent Wilkins Micawber and Mrs. Micawber, Uriah Heep, Miss Moucher, Mr. Spenlow, Dora, and many, many others. David Copperfield was Dickens's own favorite among his books. Nicholas Nickleby is the infamous school, Dotheboys Hall, and Walkford Square, the schoolmaster. Dickens' crusades for reform will be considered in another chapter, but Mrs. Nickleby is one of the most memorable of Dickens' foolish characters. Surely no other writer has achieved so many delineations of the silly person, masterpieces touched with an unerring hand. Yet, and this point is perhaps the crown of Dickens's genius, these foolish characters of his often reveal before the novels to which they belong are ended, some nobility of character, some goodness of hearts, some greatness in conduct or of nature, which makes us bow before them as belonging to the highest ranks of human nature. Toots in Dombey and Son is a very foolish person, but Toots saying goodbye to Florence Dombey shows a chivalry comparable with that of Sir Philip Sidney. Dick Swiveller and the Marichonis belongs to the old curiosity shop. Barnaby Rudge and his raven grip are easily found. Mr. Peckiniff, Sairy Gamp, and Betsy Prigg, terrible examples of hypocrisy and heartlessness, are from Martin Chuzzlewit. But the same book has lovable Tom Pinch and indomitable Mark Tapley, the champion of courage and good cheer in adversity. Tiny Tim and Bob Cratchit live forever in A Christmas Carol. Paul and Florence, Captain Cuttle, Susan Nipper, Mr. Toots, Cousin Phoenix belong to the crowded pages of Dombey and Son. Bleak House is a wonderful story if one chooses Caddy Jellyby from its pages. It is not because a dozen other characters are not as interesting. In Great Expectations, the boyhood of Pip is marvelously portrayed. Anyone who has read Our Mutual Friend can never forget Mr. and Mrs. Boffin or Lizzie Hexam or the R. Wilfare family or Silas Wegg or Mr. Venus or the doll's dressmaker Jenny Wren or Johnny the orphan and Mrs. Betty Higden and Sloppy. It is a point not to be overlooked that Dickens takes his characters from any occupation, but preferably it would seem from the humblest. Goodness of great wit, humor, gaiety, stout heartedness are proved by him to exist in the most depressing circumstances. His heroes and heroines do not wear crowns or jewels. They are not specially learned and they are rarely wealthy or beautiful, but they are good company, light hearted, and kind hearted. Love, faithfulness, self sacrifice, purity, sincerity, courage, and cheerfulness shine out from his pages so brightly that so engagingly that we cannot but long to join the company of those who travel the same road. Thank you very much.